The dinner plate trembled in his tattooed hands. Tiffany stood frozen in her bedroom doorway, braids tumbling across her shoulders, staring at the impossible. Kaito, the man she'd lifted from bed to wheelchair every morning for 3 years, was standing. His legs, the ones doctors swore would never bear weight again, held him steady in her hallway. The dragon tattoos coiling up his arms seemed to writhe in the dim light as his fingers gripped white porcelain. For 1,095 days, she had bathed him, dressed him, turned his body every 2 hours through endless Miami nights to prevent bed sores. She'd left Baltimore with nothing but a nursing degree and an empty bank account, taken this job because the pay was extraordinary and her life back home felt like slowly drowning. She thought she knew everything about this silent, broken man. Tiffany, Kaito said, his voice the gravelly whisper she'd memorized, but everything else about him utterly foreign. I can explain. The plate shattered against the floor. What would you do if the person you sacrificed everything for had been lying the entire time? Tell us in the comments and subscribe, because this story is just beginning. The slap echoed through the mansion's corridor before Tiffany even registered her hand moving. Kaito's head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming across his cheek. He didn't raise his hand to touch it, didn't step back, just stood there, with porcelain shards glittering between them like broken promises. Don't! Tiffany's voice cracked, her chest heaving. Don't you dare try to explain this away. 3 years. She'd given him 3 years of her life. The memories flooded back with visceral clarity. That first day, arriving at this sprawling Miami estate, palm trees swaying beyond floor-to-ceiling windows, being led to meet her new patient by a stone-faced assistant who'd said only, "Mr. Koshiba requires complete discretion." She'd expected the elderly, infirm. Instead, she'd found a man in his early 30s, slumped in a wheelchair, his muscled frame covered in intricate yakuza tattoos that marked him as something far more dangerous than the medical file suggested. Spinal injury, the file had read. T6 complete. Paralysis from mid-chest down. Prognosis, permanent. Tiffany had believed it. Why wouldn't she? The neurologist's reports were signed. The MRI images were there. And Kaito himself. He never fought the diagnosis, never showed the desperate hope most patients clung to in those early months. He'd been silent, watchful, seemingly resigned to a wheelchair for life. She'd been gentle with him anyway. That first morning, helping him transfer from bed to chair, she'd noticed how he avoided her eyes, how his jaw clenched when she touched him. She'd thought it was a shame, the humiliation of needing help with the most basic human functions. So she'd worked to preserve his dignity, narrating what she was doing before she did it, respecting his silence, never pushing him to talk about the scars that crisscrossed his torso or the bullet wound that had destroyed his spine. "My name's Tiffany," she'd said that first week, adjusting the leg rests on his chair. "I grew up in Baltimore, went to nursing school there, worked at Hopkins for 2 years before I decided I needed a change. My sister thinks I'm running away from something, but honestly, sometimes running toward a fresh start looks the same as running away from the past." Kaito had said nothing, but she caught him watching her reflection in the window. Slowly, over months, she'd built a routine around his care. 7 a.m. transfers, breakfast preparation, range of motion exercises for his legs, the ones that would never walk again. She'd learned to read his subtle cues, the tension in his shoulders when he was in pain, the way his fingers drummed against the armrest when he was thinking, the barely perceptible softening around his eyes on the rare occasions something amused him. She told herself it was just a job. Good pay, room and board included, a chance to save money for the community clinic she'd dreamed of opening since nursing school. But somewhere between the 6th month and the first year, it had become more than that. She'd started staying in his room longer than necessary, reading to him from the books on his shelf, Japanese literature mostly, which she'd stumble through, making him correct her pronunciation in that low, patient voice. She'd begun cooking meals that reminded her of home, soul food her grandmother had taught her, watching to see if he enjoyed them. She'd caught herself styling her braids differently, wondering if he noticed. And at night, alone in her bedroom down the hall, she'd admitted the terrible truth. She was falling in love with a man who would never walk again, never dance with her, never stand beside her at an altar. A man whose criminal past was written in ink across his skin. A man who barely spoke to her. She'd fallen in love with him anyway. Every morning, Tiffany said now, her voice shaking with rage, I lifted you. I bathed you. I helped you with, she couldn't finish. The intimacy of those 3 years crashed over her, each memory now poisoned. You let me believe you were helpless. I was helpless. Kaito's voice was rough, just not the way you thought. Don't you dare make this poetic. It's the truth. He took a step toward her, an easy, fluid movement that made her flinch. Tiffany, please, let me explain what happened. She should have run, should have packed her bags, called her sister, and gotten on the first flight back to Baltimore. But 5 years of nursing had taught her one thing. You don't walk away from a patient until you understand the full diagnosis, even when the patient had been lying to you all along. You have 5 minutes, she said coldly. Then I'm gone. Kaito's shoulders dropped slightly. Relief or resignation, she couldn't tell. He moved to the living room, his gait steady, practiced. How long had he been walking in secret? Months? Years? He sat on the leather couch, sat normally, not the careful transfer she'd assisted with countless times, and began to speak. 5 years ago, my uncle Gauzy Diamond shot me in the spine. Tiffany remained standing, arms crossed, but she didn't interrupt. The Koshiba family has controlled certain operations in South Florida for 3 generations, Kaito continued, his eyes fixed on his hands. Legitimate businesses on the surface, real estate, imports, restaurants. But underneath, the old ways persisted. My father tried to transition us out of the criminal enterprises before he died. He wanted me to finish what he started. Your uncle disagreed. Diamond is my father's younger brother. He believed going legitimate was a weakness, that it dishonored our family's power. Kaito's jaw tightened. 6 months after my father's death, I officially announced the family's exit from our illegal operations. Diamond made his move that night. The story emerged in fragments. A meeting in the family's warehouse, Damon's men blocking the exits, the confrontation that erupted into violence. Kaito's own bodyguards, bought by Diamond, are turning their weapons on him. The bullet that tore through his spine as he dove for cover. They left me for dead in that warehouse, Kaito said quietly. But one man, Takashi, you've met him, stayed loyal. He got me to a private hospital, a surgeon we trusted. For the first 18 months, the paralysis was real. The bullet had severed nerves and caused massive damage. The doctor said I'd never walk again. But you did. Tiffany's voice was flat. Slowly, painfully. The surgeon was experimenting with new techniques, nerve regeneration therapy, intensive rehabilitation. But I made him keep it secret. Kaito finally met her eyes. Because if Diamond knew I was healing, he would have finished what he started. So you pretended. I'll let everyone believe the official story. Tragic accident, permanent disability. The young Koshiba heir broken and helpless. Diamond took control of the family businesses. All of them, legitimate and otherwise. He thought he'd won. The hint of a bitter smile crossed Kaito's face. While he was consolidating power, I was learning to stand again. Tiffany's mind raced, recalculating everything. The exercises I did with you. The range of motion therapy. Helped more than you know. But at night, After you went to bed, I had private sessions with a physical therapist. Someone Takashi trusted completely. Kaito's expression shifted, became almost tender. You were never supposed to be part of this, Tiffany. When I needed a live-in nurse to maintain the appearance of disability, Takashi found you through an agency. American, no connections to my world, excellent credentials. You were perfect because you were an outsider, a prop in your revenge plan. At first, yes. He didn't flinch from the accusation. But then you stayed. You cared. You talked to me like I was human, not a yakuza boss or a tragedy. You read me Toni Morrison and Haruki Murakami. You made your grandmother's gumbo and laughed when I couldn't handle the spice. You told me about your dreams, the clinic you wanted to open in West Baltimore, serving the community that raised you. Tiffany's throat tightened. Those conversations had felt sacred to her, the moments when Kaito's walls came down slightly. Every morning when you helped me dress, Kaito continued, his voice dropping. I had to remind myself not to react, not to show that I could feel your hands. Every night you checked on me before bed. I want to stand up and tell you everything. You became... He stopped, searching for words. You became the reason I want to take back what Diamond stole. Not for power or revenge, for the chance to be whole enough to deserve you. The confession hit like a physical blow. Tiffany felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You don't get to make this romantic, she said. You lied to me for 3 years. You let me sacrifice. I know. You let me fall in love with you while you were lying. The words escaped before she could stop them. Kaito's eyes widened slightly, the first genuine surprise she'd seen from him. You? He started to stand, then seemed to think better of it. Tiffany, I didn't know. You never said. Of course I didn't say anything. The anger erupted. You were in a wheelchair. Kaito, you were my patient. What kind of person would I be if I'd put that burden on you? She laughed bitterly. Except it was all a lie, so I guess it doesn't matter what kind of person I am. It matters. Kaito's voice was fierce. It matters because I fell in love with you, too. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and Tiffany's ragged breathing. When? She whispered. The day you sang while cooking. Some old Motown song your mother used to play. You thought I was asleep, but I was watching you through the kitchen doorway, watching you dance with a wooden spoon, completely yourself. That's when I knew. His hands clenched into fists. That's when I knew I was going to take back everything Diamond stole, so I could stand beside you as a whole man. Tiffany turned away, overwhelmed. 3 years of memories were rewriting themselves in real time. Every tender moment, every late-night conversation, every time she'd thought her feelings were one-sided, it had all been mutual, hidden beneath layers of necessary deception. But it had still been deception. I need time, she said. I need to think about. The sharp buzz of Kaito's phone cut her off. He pulled it from his pocket, and Tiffany watched his expression transform from vulnerable to lethal in seconds. What is it? Diamond knows. Kaito was already moving, crossing to a panel in the wall that Tiffany had never noticed. It slid open, revealing monitors showing security camera feeds of the mansion's perimeter. He has informants everywhere. Someone must have seen me walking last week. So what does that mean? Kaito pulled a handgun from a hidden safe, checked the magazine with practiced efficiency that reminded Tiffany exactly who she'd been living with all this time. Not a patient, a gangster. It means he's coming to finish what he started 5 years ago. Kaito's voice was calm, controlled, and anyone close to me becomes a target. The implication sank in like ice water. Me, you. Kaito finally looked at her, and the fear in his eyes was raw. I have a car ready. Cash, documents under a clean name, everything you need to disappear. Takashi can drive you to the airport right now. There's a flight to New York in 2 hours. You've had an escape plan ready for me since the day you arrived. He crossed the room in quick strides, stopping just short of touching her. Tiffany, please. I can handle Diamond. I've been preparing for this confrontation for 5 years. But I can't, his voice cracked. I can't focus if I'm worried about keeping you safe. So this confession wasn't about honesty, Tiffany said, understanding dawning. It's about getting me to run before the shooting starts. It's about both. The desperation in his voice was new, unguarded. I love you. I should have told you the truth months ago, should have given you the choice then. But I was selfish and scared, and I kept waiting for the right moment. Now Damon's forced my hand, and you're in danger because of my choices. On the security monitors, Tiffany could see dark SUVs pulling up to the mansion's gates. How long until they breached the perimeter? She asked. Kaito glanced at the screens. 20 minutes. Maybe less. He grabbed her hand, the first time he'd intentionally touched her since standing up. Please, Tiffany. Please go. She looked at their joined hands. His palm was calloused, warm, and trembling slightly despite his controlled voice. 3 years she'd held this hand during exercises, during transfers, during the quiet moments when he'd seemed most alone. She told him once, maybe 6 months in, about her father. How he'd worked double shifts at the steel mill until his heart gave out. How her mother had raised 3 daughters alone, never asking for help, never showing weakness. How Tiffany had learned that strength meant carrying your burdens silently. But she'd been wrong about that. Her mother's real strength hadn't been in silence. It had been in staying, in showing up every day, even when things were hard, even when leaving would have been easier. I'm not running, Tiffany said. You don't understand what's coming. I understand perfectly. She met his eyes. I understand that you're a yakuza boss with a criminal past. I understand that your uncle wants you dead. I understand that staying here tonight might get me killed. She squeezed his hand. I also understand that I've spent 3 years learning how to care for you, and I'm not about to stop now. This isn't caregiving. This is a war zone. Then teach me how to survive it. Tiffany's voice was steady. You said you fell in love with me. You said I was the reason you wanted to take back your life. Well, here's your chance to let me in for real. No more protecting me with lies. No more secret plans. If we're doing this, we're doing it together. Kaito stared at her like she was something holy and terrifying all at once. You're serious. Dead serious. She allowed herself a grim smile. No pun intended. For a moment, Kaito just looked at her. Then something shifted in his expression, a decision being made. He pulled her close, his arms coming around her for the first time without the pretense of needing support, and pressed his forehead against hers. If we survive this, he murmured, I'm going to marry you. If we survive this, Tiffany replied, I might just say yes. The next 20 minutes moved with brutal efficiency. Takashi arrived with 3 other men, loyal soldiers who'd been waiting for this confrontation for 5 years. They moved through the mansion, securing access points, arming themselves, transforming the home Tiffany had thought she knew into a fortress. Kaito gave her a quick lesson in basic firearm safety, pressing a lightweight pistol into her hands. Safety here. Aim center mass, squeeze, don't pull. But this is a last resort, understood? You stay in the interior rooms, away from windows. What about you? I'll be exactly where I need to be. He checked his own weapon one last time. Diamond thinks I'm weak, broken. That's our advantage. He'll expect me to hide, to surrender. He won't expect. The front windows exploded inward. Glass erupted across the living room in a crystalline storm as gunfire ripped through the mansion. Tiffany hit the floor on instinct, Kaito's body covering hers as bullets chewed through furniture and walls. Stay down, Kaito shouted over the chaos. But Tiffany had seen the security monitors. 3 SUVs, at least 15 armed men, all converging on the house. This wasn't a simple hit. This was an execution. The next minutes blurred into chaos. The thunder of gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke and gunpowder, the shouts of men in Japanese and English. Kaito and his men returned fire from strategic positions, their defense clearly rehearsed. Tiffany crawled toward the interior hallway, the pistol heavy in her shaking hands. This was insane. She was a nurse from Baltimore, not a soldier. She should have taken the escape route, should have. A figure crashed through the garden door. Gauzy Daiman was older than Kaito, maybe mid-50s, with the same sharp features but twisted by years of cruelty into something predatory. His eyes swept the room and landed on Tiffany with immediate recognition. The nurse, he sneered in accented English, raising his gun toward her. My nephew's weakness. Tiffany tried to raise her own weapon, but fear had turned her limbs to stone. Then Kaito was there, tackling his uncle from the side. They crashed through the glass coffee table in an explosion of violence, years of betrayal erupting into brutal combat. Kaito fought with the desperation of a man who'd spent 5 years preparing for this moment, but Daiman was vicious, pulling a knife when his gun skittered away across the debris-strewn floor. You were supposed to stay broken. Daiman screamed, slashing wildly. You were supposed to die. Kaito caught his wrist, and the two men locked in a struggle that Tiffany couldn't intervene in without risking hitting the wrong person. Around them, the battle raged as Kaito's men fought to hold Damon's forces at bay. Then Damon's eyes flicked toward Tiffany, and she saw his intention a half-second before he executed it. He wrenched free from Kaito's grip and hurled the knife straight at her. Time seemed to slow. Tiffany saw the blade spinning through the air, saw the trajectory that would bury it in her chest, saw her own death approaching with crystalline clarity. Kaito threw himself between them. The knife buried itself in Kaito's shoulder with a sound Tiffany would never forget, a wet thunk that seemed to echo louder than the gunfire still raging around them. Kaito staggered, but didn't fall. Blood bloomed across his white shirt, spreading like dark flowers, but he stayed upright. His good hand shot out and grabbed Daiman by the throat, slamming him against the wall with enough force to crack the drywall. You want to be broken, Kaito said, his voice deadly calm despite the knife protruding from his shoulder. Let me show you what broken really looks like. Takashi and his men flooded the room, weapons trained on Daiman. Outside, the sounds of combat were fading. Damon's forces retreating or surrendering. Tiffany couldn't tell which through the ringing in her ears. I could kill you right now, Kaito continued, his fingers tightening around his uncle's throat. Takashi would help me hide the body. No one would ever find you. Damon's face was turning purple, but his eyes still blazed with defiance. Do it, he choked out. Prove you're still your father's son. Kaito's hand trembled. Tiffany saw the war happening behind his eyes. 5 years of pain and betrayal and rage demanding blood. This was justice. This was revenge. This was everything he'd suffered for. Then Kaito's eyes found Tiffany's across the devastated room. She was still on the floor, covered in plaster dust and broken glass, the unfired pistol in her shaking hands. But she was alive. She was whole. She'd stayed when she could have run. Kaito's grip on Damon's throat loosened. No, he said quietly. My father wanted to build something better than blood and revenge. He died trying. Kaito stepped back, and Daiman collapsed to his knees, gasping. You're going to live, Uncle. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a federal prison, watching from a cell as I rebuild everything you destroyed. You're going to know you failed. He turned to Takashi. Call our contact at the FBI. Tell them we're ready to testify about all of it. The trafficking, the money laundering, every dirty deal Daiman made in the family's name. In exchange for immunity and protection for everyone under this roof. Kaito, Takashi said carefully. Once we open that door, we can't close it. The whole family's history burns to the ground, Kaito finished. Good. We'll build something new from the ashes. Only then did he seem to notice the knife still embedded in his shoulder. His knees buckled, and Tiffany was there, catching him the way she had so many times before. Except now she knew he could feel it, could feel her arms around him, could feel everything he'd been pretending not to feel for 3 years. "I've got you," she whispered. "I know," Kaito murmured, his face pressed against her shoulder. "You always did." The federal agents arrived within the hour, flooding the mansion with crime scene investigators and paramedics. Tiffany refused to leave Kaito's side as they stabilized him for transport, her nursing training overriding the shock still coursing through her system. The knife had missed anything vital. Intentionally or luckily, she couldn't say. The paramedics wanted to take him to the hospital, but Kaito insisted on his private surgeon, the same one who'd overseen his secret rehabilitation. The FBI agreed, provided they stationed agents at the facility. In the ambulance, Kaito's hand found Tiffany's. "You should have run," he said, his voice weak from blood loss and adrenaline crash. "You should have told me the truth 3 years ago," she countered. "Guess we're both stubborn." "Tiffany," he struggled to focus through the pain medication the paramedics had administered. "I meant what I said. About marrying you. I know you have every reason to walk away, to never forgive me, but—" "Kaito," she squeezed his hand. "Shut up and let me take care of you." The ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Yes, ma'am." Over the following weeks, the full scope of the Koshiba family's criminal empire unraveled. True to his word, Kaito testified against Diamond and every corrupt official, business partner, and criminal associate his uncle had dealt with. The FBI investigation reached into 3 states and exposed trafficking networks, illegal gambling operations, and money laundering schemes worth hundreds of millions. Diamond received 4 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. The legitimate Koshiba businesses, the restaurants, the real estate holdings, the import companies, were restructured under independent management with full federal oversight. Kaito retained minority ownership but divested control, using his remaining wealth to establish a foundation focused on helping victims of organized crime. Through it all, Tiffany stayed, not as his nurse. That fiction had died the night Kaito stood up, but as something far more complex. They had to relearn each other without the barrier of pretense. Some days were harder than others. Tiffany still woke up angry sometimes, remembering the 3 years of one-sided sacrifice. Kaito still struggled with the instinct to protect her by hiding truth. But they were learning. One night, 3 months after the siege, Tiffany found Kaito in the mansion's garden. Most of the house was under renovation, repairing the damage from the battle, but the garden had survived intact. He was walking the perimeter without his cane. He needed one immediately after the shoulder injury, another layer of irony that neither of them mentioned. "Can't sleep?" she asked, joining him on the stone path. "Thinking about my father," Kaito admitted. "He used to walk out here when he was trying to make difficult decisions. Said the garden helped him remember what he was fighting for: beauty, peace, growth. Things worth protecting." Tiffany slipped her hand into his. "What are you fighting for now?" "You." He said it simply, without flourish. "A life where I don't have to lie. A future that isn't stained by my family's past." He turned to face her fully. "I know it's too soon. I know you need more time to forgive." "I forgave you weeks ago," Tiffany interrupted. "I'm still angry sometimes, and we're still figuring out how to trust each other without secrets. But forgiveness? That happened the moment you took a knife meant for me." Kaito's breath caught. "Then what are we waiting for? For you to ask me properly." He understood immediately. Right there in the garden, surrounded by night-blooming jasmine and the soft sound of the fountain. Kaito lowered himself to one knee. "I don't have a ring yet," he said. "I wanted to wait until I knew what you'd want. Something traditional, something modern, and something that honored both our cultures." "Kaito, and I know my family's history is complicated, and there will be people who judge us for—" "Kaito, but I love you, Tiffany. I've loved you since you sang Motown in my kitchen. I'll love you until—" Tiffany pulled him to his feet and kissed him, cutting off the rambling proposal with the answer her body already knew. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, yes, yes." 1 year later, the garden had been transformed. Cherry blossom branches, imported at Kaito's insistence, intertwined with magnolia trees that reminded Tiffany of southern springs. White chairs formed a semicircle around a simple arch decorated with both traditional Japanese silk and kente cloth in the gold and green her mother had loved. The guest list was small. Tiffany's sister had flown in from Baltimore with her 2 kids, who were currently chasing each other around the garden in their formal clothes. Takashi stood as Kaito's best man, along with 2 of the other men who'd fought beside them that terrible night. Tiffany's best friend for nursing school served as her maid of honor, still somewhat bewildered by the entire situation, but supportive nonetheless. No one from the old Koshiba family attended. That chapter had closed. Tiffany wore a dress that had taken 3 months to design. White silk with traditional Japanese embroidery along the hem and a kente cloth sash at the waist, the same pattern her mother had worn at her own wedding. Her braids were twisted into an elegant updo, decorated with small white flowers. Kaito wore a tailored suit that hid the scar on his shoulder, the knife wound that had healed into a permanent reminder of the night everything changed. His yakuza tattoos were covered, though Tiffany had made it clear she loved them, loved the history they represented even if that history was dark. The ceremony blended traditions from both cultures. They exchanged rings and vows in English, then shared sake in the Japanese custom. Kaito's vows were characteristically brief. "You saved my life twice. Once when you cared for me as a patient. Once when you chose to stay as yourself. Everything I am, everything I will be, I owe to you." Tiffany's vows were more complex. "You taught me that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's dangerous. Sometimes it's choosing the hard truth over the easy lie. Sometimes it's standing up, literally, and walking toward the person who sees you whole. I choose you, Kaito. Every day, in truth, I choose you." When the officiant pronounced them married, the small gathering erupted in applause. Tiffany's nephew shouted something inappropriate that made everyone laugh. Takashi wiped his eyes surreptitiously. At the reception, held in the same living room where the battle had raged a year ago, now completely renovated, Kaito stood to make a toast. "Many of you know this house has a complicated history," he began, his English accented but clear. "A year ago, it was a battlefield. Before that, it was a prison of my own making. But Tiffany helped me understand that buildings, like people, can be rebuilt, can be reimagined, can become something better than what they were." He raised his glass toward Tiffany. "To my wife, who taught me that healing means remembering differently, who stayed when running would have been smarter, who loved me when I was lying and loves me still now that I've learned to tell the truth. To second chances," Tiffany added, raising her own glass, "and to choosing love even when, especially when, it's complicated." The party continued into the evening. At one point, someone put on Motown music, and Tiffany found herself dancing with Kaito in the same space where he'd once sat motionless in a wheelchair, watching her cook. "You're thinking about it," Kaito murmured, reading her expression. "How could I not?" She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. 3 years I cared for you in this house, believing one story. Now we're married in it, living a completely different truth. Regret. No. She pulled back to look at him. But I still get angry sometimes. Is that allowed? It's required, Kaito said seriously. I lied to you for 3 years, Tiffany. I don't expect you to forget that, even if you've forgiven it. The anger is honest. I'll take honest anger over false peace any day. This was new Kaito, the one who didn't hide, who met hard emotions head-on instead of burying them beneath silence. Learning to be this version of himself was his own rehabilitation, separate from the physical therapy that had restored his ability to walk. I love you, Tiffany said, the words still new enough to feel significant each time. Even when I'm angry. Maybe especially then. Good. He kissed her forehead. Because I love you constantly, inconveniently, and with absolutely no skill for deception anymore. She laughed. I'll believe that when I see it. You will, he promised. Every day, for the rest of our lives, you will. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the catering staff had packed up, Tiffany and Kaito stood alone in the garden one final time. The cherry blossoms were beginning to fall, pink petals drifting through the air like snow. This was the same garden where Man had attacked, where Kaito had taken a knife meant for her, where everything had come crashing down and been rebuilt. I still dream about that night sometimes, Tiffany admitted. The knife, the blood, wondering what would have happened if you hadn't moved fast enough. I dream about it too, Kaito said. Different version though. In my dreams, I'm still in the wheelchair. I can see the knife coming. I want to save you, but my body won't move. I wake up terrified that I'll lose you to something I can't control. But you can walk. Now, yes. But for 18 months, I couldn't. And even after I could, I chose not to for 3 more years. That helplessness, it changed me, Tiffany. Made me understand how fragile power really is. How quickly everything can be taken away. Tiffany took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Your father wanted to build something better than revenge and violence. You did that. The foundation, the testimony, choosing prison for Man instead of death. That was building something better. With your help. Kaito pulled her close. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Yes, you could have. She was firm about this. You're stronger than you think, Kaito. You survived betrayal, a bullet, and years of pretending to be helpless. You would have found your way eventually. Maybe, he considered, but it would have been a lonelier path. A colder victory. They stood together in silence, watching petals fall in the moonlight. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight, the official end of their wedding day, the beginning of the rest of their lives. Tiffany, Kaito said softly, the clinic you wanted to open, in West Baltimore. She'd almost forgotten. The dream had gotten lost somewhere between Miami and Mafia wars and finding love in the strangest circumstances. What about it? I've been working with your sister, Kaito admitted. There's a building available in your old neighborhood. Former urgent care facility, already zoned for medical use. It needs renovation, but the bones are good. He paused. I thought maybe we could open it together. Your dream, my resources, a partnership built on truth this time. Tiffany's breath caught. You're serious. Completely. I can't undo the 3 years I stole from you with my lies. But I can help you build the future you've always wanted. If you'll let me. She turned to face him fully. This man who'd been her patient, her liar, her savior, her husband. All of these things layered into one complicated truth. On one condition, she said. Anything. No more secrets. If you're planning something, you tell me. If you're scared, you tell me. If you're hurting, you tell me. Deal. Kaito smiled. The real smile, the one that transformed his scarred face into something beautiful. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss in the falling cherry blossoms. 2 people who'd found each other through lies and chosen to stay through truth. The garden around them held ghosts of violence and deception, but also memories of healing and transformation. Some love stories begin with honesty. Others earn it. As they walked back toward the house together, Tiffany caught Kaito watching her with that expression she'd noticed 1,000 times during those 3 years. The look she'd once mistaken for a patient's gratitude, but now recognized as love, carefully hidden, desperately held. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking about that first day," Kaito said. "When you introduced yourself, told me you were running toward a fresh start. I remember. You found it. We both did." He squeezed her hand. "Sometimes the fresh start looks nothing like what we imagined. But it's real, and it's ours." Tiffany smiled, the last of her anger finally settling into something softer. Not forgiveness, which had already been given, but acceptance. Acceptance of who Kaito was, who she was, and who they could become together. "Come on," she said, pulling him toward their home. "Let's go forward." And together, without pretense or deception, they did. Would you have made the same choice? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge what we think we know about love, sacrifice, and second chances.